States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Rita, would you call the roll, please?
Commissioner Lyons?
Here.
Vice Mayor Stanley?
Here.
Commissioner White? Here. Commissioner Orthmeyer? Mayor Morgan?
Here.
And let the record show that also present, John Randolph, Town Attorney, Edward Nazaro, Staff Attorney, Gregory Dunham, Town Manager, Ed Allen, Police Chief, and myself, Rita Taylor.
Thank you very much. We've been presented with the minutes from our May 10th meeting. You've had an opportunity to read it. Are there any corrections, additions, changes? If not, is there a motion to approve?
Motion to approve the minutes from the last commission meeting.
Second.
Ms. Taylor?
Commissioner Lyons?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Stanley?
Yes.
Commissioner White?
Yes.
Commissioner Orthmeyer?
Yes.
Mayor Morgan?
Yes. I don't believe there's any changes to the agenda. I'll be commenting on the ARPB hearing. Let's go to our announcements on meetings. The next commission meeting will be July 9th at 9 a.m. That is not a Friday, it is a Tuesday. We normally have our meetings the second Tuesday of every month. The second Friday of every month. This will be on a Tuesday. It will be followed by, frankly, at the same time, the preliminary budget meeting. Our next meeting will be August 9th, 2019, at the regular Friday, second Friday of the month. Kind of garbled that, but you get the gist of it. Let's move on to public comment. We are very pleased to have Senator Lloyd Berman here. Welcome, Senator. Thank you for coming.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. Good morning, Mayor, Commissioners, friends, neighbors. So we completed the session in the beginning of May. We were only one day late, which was good for the legislature. And we did a $91 billion budget for the state of Florida. There were some good things for Palm Beach County. We've, brought back money for projects. I know personally I brought back money for a project to help individuals who are being released from prison. That's kind of like a halfway house in the Pahokee area. We brought back money for water projects, for transportation. So, that's one of our goals as the Palm Beach County Legislative Delegation. Even though Palm Beach County is very much a donor county, we still try and make sure that we bring back a lot of money for projects here. I've traditionally done these reports, as many of you know. I was a state representative for 8 years before I was a state senator, and this is the first time I've had Gulfstream in my district. And when I do these reports, traditionally, I like to report to you all about what happened regarding preemption in Tallahassee, so that you'll know what are areas that you cannot pass legislation about. As you know, in Tallahassee, there's a pretty strong movement to preempt local government. It's pretty disconcerting to me, and I usually vote against a lot of these bills, but I want to go over some of the things that we did regarding preemption. One of the things we did is said that and this is on the governor's desk now, and we'll see if he vetoes it. It's pretty controversial. I don't know if he will or won't. We said that cities cannot ban vegetable gardens in front yards. HOAs can. So if you have an HOA, you can ban it. But right now, if the governor signs this bill, if somebody wants to grow corn in their front yard, they can. Another bill that we passed had to do with tree trimming. If somebody gets a statement from the International Society of Arboriculture saying that a tree is a danger to the area, then you as a city cannot regulate pruning, trimming, removal, or if they remove it, replacement either. So those are pretty significant preemption things. We also did some preemption concerning 5G, which was done last year, which has to do with the placement of towers. We did more preemption on that issue. So when wireless technology comes in with 5G, you're going to have to work with them because they preempted a lot of the things about it. I don't know if you guys are looking at if there's been anybody using those scooters here in town. I know I might have seen some in Delray. They're micro mobility scooters. we did look at preempting that, and the state did not, and if we preempt it, it's gonna say, you know, you cannot do any regulation, only the state can regulate it. We did put in place, like, if there's a storm coming, those companies have to pick up their scooters. We said that you can't require a driver's license to rent one of those. I personally think that, we might look at that issue again next year. So if you want to regulate that, I would say do it now, because a lot of times they'll grandfather in any cities that have already done their own regulation. So something to think about if you're interested in, you know, setting up your own regulations about that. We did a lot about government accountability. I heard you just talk about your budget. You're gonna need to have it posted online. There's in advance of the meeting, and then you have to keep your budget on your website for 2 months after, 2 years after you pass it. There's also, in October, there's gonna be some requirements regarding financial reporting about cities, about average medium income, about salaries and things like that. I'm sure the League of Cities will be giving you more guidance, but I just wanted to give you a little bit of a heads up. And we also passed a bill saying that if you pass an ordinance in an area where we've already preempted it, you can be responsible for attorney's fees if there is a challenge to that. So we're definitely, they're pretty serious about preemption and what is done. We did pass one other preemption bill that I actually did support. I didn't support any of that other legislation, having to do with firefighters and cancer presumptions. So it's been proven that firefighters have like 2 to 3 times the risk of cancer because of what they're doing, running into these burning buildings and chemicals. And we gave them cancer treatment at no cost and a one-time cash payout of $25,000 if they are diagnosed with cancer. And there's certain cancers that fall in the category. It's not every cancer, but it's cancers that have been proven to be related to their job. So I was really happy about that. I think that was one of the best things that we did. Matt Wilhite from Palm Beach County, he's a firefighter, he was a huge advocate for it, and it really, I think it was great. I like to end on a little bit of a lighter note, so I will tell you, we always do at least one bill that I would say qualifies as frivolous and trivial. This year's bill had to do with lottery tickets. Now when you buy well, the governor still hasn't signed it, we'll see if he signs it, but when you buy a lottery ticket, it has to say on it, warning, gambling can be addictive. So, you know, we only passed 197 bills in Tallahassee, so I'm not sure why we spent much time on that issue also. I'm happy to answer any questions that you have. I hope this was informative. I'm really happy to represent you here in Gulfstream. I handed out to a lot of people my Berman Bulletin. You can, if you'd like to subscribe, you can go on the website and write in subscribe. But it has my phone number and my address on it. Our office is at I-95 in Gateway, and we're happy to help with any constituent issues that anybody has. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Senator. I must say it was very helpful to have you
Thank you.
essentially tell us what happened in the last section, because we get some information from the League of Cities, but that really, you know, draws a head-on point as to what might affect this town. So thank you very much.
You're welcome. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to speak?
Okay.
Mr. Burns?
If nobody else will, I will. Okay. Okay, so good morning, Bob Burns, and I'd like to propose that the council at some meeting in the future discuss a couple of proposals that I have put together. The idea being that I know you can't discuss anything except in the sunshine, so to speak, so I'm bringing this up with the idea that maybe we can get on the agenda going forward as a possible way to get some more input. All right, so my suggestion is that we do something about the traffic flow. Mayor Morgan, I know I got your note about all the posts and stuff, of which I am to blame on that. And I have them in there, but my lawn looks pretty good. So unless something dramatic happens, the chief comes by and says you need to get them out of there, I'm gonna leave them in unless we can come up with some better solution. I can tell you as my house being on the corner of Lakeview and A1A, and the signs are up about no through traffic. It's been, should we say, less than successful on deterring a lot of trucks. The main trucks that have been deterred are the people that are here all the time, the lawn people and so forth. But basically, everybody else pretty much, when they go on their GPS, it says this is the way in and that's the way they go, and that's in the process, I think, of being changed. But we've gone so far as to have one of Gulfstream's finest park in my driveway, and as trucks come by, they've followed them and give them a warning about this. Certainly they can't do that all the time, but all the signs are there in both directions, very clearly stated, and it still becomes very much of an issue of the trucks coming in. So I'd like to propose that we make Lakeview Drive to Gulf Road one way going in. So it'll be one way from A1A to Polo, one way in, and then we make Banyan from A1A to all the way through, because you have to continue that, make that one way out. I think this would make a big difference from a standpoint of at least the traffic that way. Carrying that on, that's one possibility. The second thing would be, if that makes sense, then maybe we might want to consider making Gulfview Road one way, going from Gulf Road to Banyan, one way going from south to north, and making Polo Drive one way north, going from Old School, or going from, again, Gulf Road to Old School. I have mentioned this to the chief and lieutenant. They haven't endorsed it or said anything other than it's worth considering, it's not such a terrible idea. The one concern that they brought up was if you did all this one-way stuff, there would be a significant number of signs that needed to be put in. Approximately 22 different signs that needed to be put in to make sure that everybody goes where they're supposed to go. The one thing it would really do, as we know, we don't want to take away from the charm of the city by making the roads too big, and in fact we can't make the roads too wide. So this might be a possible alternative to control the fact, because we got an option. We can either have torn up lawns or sticks in the road, and I don't know that either one of them is a good option if there's something else that we could do. So that's my one suggestion.
If I can just,
Sir.
Ryan, even though we have a 3-minute limit, I think this is important, so I'm gonna allow you to speak, because I know what you're touching on. I think it's important.
Okay.
But on this point, at our last commission meeting, we did have a full, what I believe to be a pretty full analysis by the chief on the one-way roads. And while there is some potential benefit to it, there is certainly a lot of downside to it. So I urge you to sit through the hearing today. We're going to be we have not given up on this topic, as I indicated in my letter, and we're going to be raising some additional options for the town.
Okay, good.
One way would not be the first choice of this commission.
Okay, and that's fine. You didn't hurt my feelings, so it's okay.
All right, so go ahead.
And I apologize because I didn't know that. If I had known that, I would not have been wasting your time with this.
It's not a waste of time.
Okay.
And you're articulate in presenting, your evaluation. You live here as to what might work.
Okay.
We're all trying to address this problem, so I appreciate it very much.
Okay. My second suggestion is probably just as out there is I called Rita yesterday to find out that on November 1st, 2011, I paid for the underground, which is almost gonna be 9 years. And that's not your fault. So understand, I'm not throwing stones at you guys because you didn't get this done. It happened, it is. It's a reality. It's almost been 9 years and it's still not done. I would like to suggest that part of this problem is obviously the construction in that case, but also it carries over to some of the other stuff. So I would like to suggest that maybe for further discussion that we eliminate the building moratorium that goes now from November 1st through May 1st, with the exception of things that would create undue amount of noise, such as pilings. It's my understanding that this whole ordinance came about because of one incident with one complaint. Now, I'm not going to say that that's written somewhere, but it's my understanding in the early 80s, a new resident had problem with a seawall and decided that they needed to take care of that, in which case they brought in the pilings to fix it. The next door neighbor complained about it, and again, it's my understanding there was one complaint on one issue, and that here we are now. A good example of getting this thing done would be that the big house on Polo that took forever, you know, maybe something could have been done if as you have already done, put in some ordinances about when you start and when you do things. And the second thing is, the house that's under construction now, the cat lady's house, probably would almost be done if they didn't have to wait. Further with that is approximately 50%, and this is just a guess by asking around, approximately 50% of us are here year-round. And by having this construction moratorium during the season means that a year-round resident has to put up with this, whereas the other residents don't have to. And I don't know how, I don't want to use the word fair, but how much sense it makes to do that.
It's a good point, and it's been brought up at the commission meeting, Ms. Ortwein brought it up. And we're putting it on the agenda for next commission meeting to discuss it. So I think it's worthy of consideration.
Okay, that's it. Thank you very much. Appreciate your time.
Thanks, Bob. Anyone else wish to speak? If not, then let's move on to the Board of Adjustment hearing. The commission will be sitting as a Board of Adjustment on an application for appeal of a final action of the Planning and Building Administrator. And we have the town attorney, Mr. Randolph, who's going to give us an outline of what the case is.
Good morning, thank you. I would like at this point to just give an overview of your responsibilities here today relating to this appeal. As the mayor has indicated, you are sitting as a Board of Adjustment to consider an appeal by Martin O'Boyle of a decision by Rita Taylor to deny an application for a dock/promenade filed by Mr. O'Boyle relating to his property at 23 Hidden Harbor Drive in Gulfstream. You have in your backup materials a copy of Mr. O'Boyle's application for approval, his building permit application, and Rita Taylor's March 15, 2019 letter to Bill Ring denying the application, explaining that the application violates Article 8, Division 2, Section 66-369, docks at subsections 6B and 6E. You also have correspondence in your backup relating to the scheduling of this hearing with Bill Ring, a memorandum of May 3rd, 2019 to Mayor Morgan and the Commissioners from Town Manager Greg Dunham, explaining the history of this matter and the town's position in regard to the appeal. And you also have a letter from Joanne O'Connor, acting on as attorney for the town, supporting Rita Taylor's denial of the application. All of which, along with the applicable ordinances, are made part of the record of these proceedings today. I would also submit that the settlement agreement between Mr. O'Boyle and the town dated July 26, 2013, and the development agreement between Mr. O'Boyle and the town dated September 17, 2013, are relevant to this appeal and are submitted as part of the record today. You are sitting today to entertain Mr. O'Boyle's appeal of Rita Taylor's denial of his application. You are sitting as judges in a quasi-judicial capacity to determine, based upon the record established before you, whether to grant or deny Mr. O'Boyle's appeal. This is not a trial de novo where testimony will be heard, but you will hear arguments set forth by the attorneys for Mr. O'Boyle and the town as to why you should grant or deny the appeal. You, of course, may ask questions of the attorneys in regard to their presentations. You should set reasonable parameters in regard to how much time each side is allowed for argument. You should start by asking how much time each side needs to present their case. Appellant should go first, the town next, and then rebuttal should be allowed to the applicant. Once all arguments are complete, you will deliberate among yourselves with no further input from the parties other than to answer questions posed to them. Also provided in Town Code at Division 5, Article 5, Section 66-169, in order for an appeal to be granted, the appellant shall show that the final review authority either, and I'm referring to the ordinance, 1, acted in a manner inconsistent with the provisions of the Town Code or other applicable local, state, or federal law, 2, made erroneous findings of fact based on the evidence and testimony placed before the final review authority at a public hearing, or 3, failed to fully consider mitigating measures or revisions offered by the applicant that would have brought the proposed project into compliance with the applicable regulations. Your decision today should be based on competent, substantial evidence, which has been made part of the record at today's hearing. Because you are acting in a quasi-judicial capacity, I will now ask each of you to divulge any ex parte communications, if any, that you have had in regard to this appeal. Of course, part of your ex parte communications will include your review of today's agenda package, which has been made part of the record. I will also ask each of you to state for the record whether you come to this hearing with an open mind, vowing to base your decision solely upon the record established before you today. So, if I may, I would like to ask if any of you have had any ex parte communications outside your review of the agenda package put before you today.
Let's start this way. Paul?
No.
I obviously reviewed the packet, and I did discuss with town staff there what the issue was, what would be brought before us, and it was consistent with what I've seen in the packet material.
I should correct, I didn't realize I should disclose discussion with the town staff, which I did have some discussion with the town staff.
And that related to what?
Just this package.
Okay.
Just an understanding of it. Be sure I was clear.
Okay.
My only ex parte communication was with Rita Taylor in regard to the package.
The same, my ex parte communication was with Rita concerning the package.
My only thing was with Rita too, but it was not over the package, it was just in general when it came in.
Okay, and the conversation related solely to what was before you in the materials today? Is that what we're talking about?
Yes.
Now, can each of you, I want to ask each of you to state whether you're coming to this hearing with an open mind and that you will base your decision today solely on the evidence that's presented here today, as opposed to anything you've heard outside this hearing. And each of you attest to that.
I'll start. I'll attest to the fact that I come to this meeting with an open mind, and I'm relying on the information submitted to me.
As well, I obviously come with an open mind, and we'll make a decision based on the evidence presented.
Yes, I've come to the hearing with an open mind and make a decision based on the evidence presented before us.
I have an open mind and I will listen to both sides and make a decision accordingly.
I too have an open mind and will make a decision on the evidence presented.
It's now time to hear from the attorney for the appellant. And Mr. Mayor, you might wish to set some parameters or inquire as to how much time is needed by the appellant and by
Yeah, who will be representing Mr. O'Rourke?
Good morning. My name is Scott Weers, and I'm the attorney for the appellant.
Mr. O'Rourke, about how much time do you believe you'll need for your presentation?
I have some documentary proffers, and we also have 3 witnesses, so I believe that 40 minutes probably should do it.
40 minutes, okay. Now, I did not know that there would be witness testimony.
I thought this was an argument on appeal as opposed to a de novo hearing? Are these,
Yeah.
what is the purpose of presenting witnesses?
So I understand that this is a quasi-judicial process, and there's gonna be substantial competent evidence that you're supposed to rely upon in order to make your decision. Part of that substantial competent evidence would have to be testimony that comes from witnesses as relating to the matters that are up on appeal.
I think it's unusual. Normally, these are argued almost as any appeal is, based on written briefs, evidence, and supporting documentation provided to the board.
I think they're all very,
However,
very short.
However, I think under the circumstances, since you only need 40 minutes or so, we can listen to the witnesses.
Thank you very
So,
much.
we'll let you proceed.
And presumably that's all based upon the record, the testimony from these was gonna be the record testimony relating to what was presented to Rita Taylor and what the dock looks like, and what the promenade looks like, et cetera.
The materials in the packet for the agenda, correct.
And Mr. Randolph, how much time do you believe you'll need?
I don't think I'll need the full 40 minutes, but I'll just, and you wanna reserve, a portion of that 40 minutes for rebuttal, Mr. Ware?
Sure, that'd be fine. So we'll do 30 and 10.
Okay, and I will probably just take 30 minutes.
All right, so we'll allow 30 minutes for the applicant's presentation with 10 minutes reserved for rebuttal.
Great. Thank you very much.
Very good. Mr. Weir?
Board members, thank you very much for your time in advance. This is something I'll hope to get through kind of quickly. We'll keep it on point. My name again is Scott Weirs. I'm from the law firm of Murdoch Weirs. Our address is 14 Southeast 4th Street in Boca Raton. We're here today on the application denial relating to the 23 Hidden Harbor Drive application for construction of a promenade and deck. As you can see in this first slide, this is a depiction of the application. You can see in the yellow colored area there that the promenade and deck runs across the back of the seawall from side to side of the property. The promenade is about 12 feet in width off of the seawall, and the deck, the dock that's over on the right-hand side is about 5 foot in depth, in width. This here is the denial letter that we received from the town, and the language in the denial letter states clearly that the 2013 settlement agreement between Martin O'Boyle and the town of Gulfstream does not apply to structures in the water. The current Gulfstream Town Code regulates docks in Article 8, Supplemental District Regulations. It goes on. It says the application is subject to this section and it violates the following provisions. Subsection 6B, no dock shall exceed 5 feet in width. Subsection 6E, for lots with designated water frontage greater than or equal to 100 feet, the docking zone shall have a 15-foot minimum offset from the setback center lines on each side, with the total setback distance being a minimum of 30% of the designated water frontage. What's critical here in this document is that this is the grounds for the denial that were given to the applicant, and here it says that the settlement agreement does not apply to structures in the water, and it applies the current code provisions relating to the construction of docks. Next. So the settlement agreement that you heard the town's attorney refer to in his opening is an exhibit to a development agreement that was entered into subsequently. So the settlement agreement is actually Exhibit B to the development agreement that is before the town. So, next one. The settlement agreement states specifically in paragraph number 1 that the town recognizes that the plaintiff O'Boyle believes that the town did not apply a correct interpretation of its code of ordinances as it pertains to, and it's the property address, and it defines that address as the property and the improvements on the property hereinafter the improvements. In particular, plaintiff O'Boyle argues that the town did not correctly apply its code with respect to his request for development approval for inter alia a level 3 architectural site plan, the application, and such other permissions, approvals, interpretations, clarifications, and authorizations relating to the property, the approvals to demolish and construct the improvements upon the property as contemplated. And this is an important term that is in the agreement. The handwritten language there says the term quote-unquote improvement as used in the settlement agreement shall also include future improvements to be constructed on the property. And so in this language here, you've got a distinction between property and improvements. And the improvements are not just the improvements contemplated at the time of the settlement agreement, but also future improvements to the property. Next slide. This is paragraph number 36 of the settlement agreement, which is the same document that we were just looking at paragraph 1 from. And this defines a building envelope. It says that the development agreement that will be entered into will A, include a survey provided by O'Boyle, which survey shall provide a building envelope for the property as designated by O'Boyle pursuant to the preceding paragraph, and allow the construction of improvements within the area between the intracoastal waterway, the private roads, and the common property line to the west. What's important here in this language is that this is contemplating that there's going to be a development agreement, that there's going to be a survey that's going to be incorporated in that development agreement, and it is going to be a designation of a building envelope on the property. So it's distinguishing between building envelope and property. Next slide. So here is the...
I'm sorry, could you go back to that one again?
Sure, so this is paragraph number 36 of the settlement agreement.
And where it indicates which survey shall provide a building envelope for the property.
Correct.
You made a distinction.
That's right, and you'll see the distinction clarified in the next slide.
Okay.
So this is the next slide here. This is Exhibit C to the development agreement, okay? And this is the survey with the building envelope that was just referenced in paragraph 36 of the settlement agreement that we just looked at. And what's important here is that you can see that there's an area that's crosshatched with an area that is water. And the area, if you look closely at the slide, it indicates that the crosshatched area is the building envelope. The area that is outside of the crosshatch is the area outside of the building envelope. I'm going to pull this up on my screen so I can see a little bit closer. So the language that is included on the survey there, that is highlighted in yellow and it's blown up at the bottom. I'm actually going to read the portion that's highlighted in yellow at the top because we cut off some of the bottom part there. Maybe the screen's just not big enough. But it says appurtenant structures such as decks, pilings, docks, and other structures, but not another living unit or interior living space. And this is defined as quote-unquote water structures, may be constructed and or installed in the area designated hereon as quote-unquote water, provided that such water structures are approved by the town of Gulfstream, if applicable, as long as the area designated open quote water close quote remains water. If any portion of the property which is presently submerged becomes no longer submerged, then such area shall be included in this cross-hatched area. Now, the reason why this language is important is because this here is the survey contemplated by the settlement agreement. It is an exhibit to the development agreement, and it specifically contemplates and expressly states that you can build stuff in the water, okay? It talks about a building envelope, but it also says that the stuff that you can build is known as water structures, and specifically calls out what types of water structures are contemplated by the town. And it says that there are things called decks, pilings, docks, and other structures. And I want you to focus on the language decks and docks. It also indicates that if at any time the water area becomes no longer submerged, somebody fills it in, somebody moves a seawall, what have you, and that water area is no longer submerged, then it says that such area shall be, the reclaimed area of the water shall be included in the cross-hatched area. So in other words, within the building envelope. Next slide.
By the way,
Sure.
is it okay to ask questions as we go along?
That's fine, sure.
Going back to the reclaimed land, I'm not sure what is the purpose of that. I don't know what you.
It's not entirely relevant to our
Okay.
appeal,
Thank you,
so.
so I won't focus on it.
Yeah, it's not anything that you need to focus on. But on this prior slide, clearly what's contemplated by the slide is that there's two areas that are mutually exclusive within the bounds of the property, that being the building envelope and the water area. And it specifically states that you may construct things in both areas. The crosshatched area is the building envelope, the water area, you can build water structures. It's limited, but it does say water structures. And within water structures, there are things defined. One of them is deck, another is dock. And so it says that you can build that stuff in the water. Excuse the informality, but I refer to stuff because it is multiple things, and frankly, it's just easier to understand.
So the complete thought according to the code.
Correct, and so the question now takes me to the next slide. What code is it that we apply to the building of these things? Paragraph 35 of the settlement agreement is a reservation of rights provision. And it specifically says that when the town is to be considering the construction of improvements upon the property, that the town is to incorporate the 1981 code. And that's important because, again, the term property is the term that's used here. The term property is a defined term as the entire parcel. It is not the term building envelope that is used here. It's the term property. So we've already seen that you can build in the crosshatched portion, and you can build some things, water structures, in the water. The question only becomes at that point, which code applies to which section? And I believe the town's position has been that the code from 1981 only applies to the building envelope, and that the current code somehow applies to everything else, that being the water section. But the reservation of rights language, which talks about which code section we apply, says that we are going to apply the 1981 code as relating to improvements on the property, not necessarily improvements in the crosshatched section or in the building envelope. Next slide. And this is an important provision here. This is a provision in the development agreement. This is paragraph number 18. And it calls out specifically conflicts if they occur. And it states, if and to the extent that there are any conflicts between this agreement and its exhibits. Exhibit B, by the way, is the settlement agreement. It's settlement agreement is exhibit B to the development agreement. It says then that the provisions of exhibit B shall prevail. So if there's any conflict between the development agreement and the settlement agreement, then the settlement agreement prevails. And again, to foreshadow the argument, the settlement agreement is the agreement that says that the 1981 code applies to the entirety of the property. Next slide. So the first argument is very simple. It's very straightforward. The settlement agreement is the overriding controlling document. It governs the parties clearly and expressly. Paragraph 18 of the development agreement says just that. The settlement agreement also expressly states that it applies to future improvements. We saw the handwritten language in paragraph 1. It says that it relates to future improvements on the property. The parties also agreed that some things may be constructed in the building envelope of the property, and that certain lesser things, perhaps, these water structures, may be built in the water portion of the property. That's clear. So there should not be any dispute that the applicant can build on both portions. The question is only which code do we apply to which section, and what's the extent of that you can build in the water. And again, the position is that in the water, there are water structures that may be constructed. You can't build a house, and you can't build anything more substantial than these water structures. And I don't know the entire universe of what water structures may be. There's probably lots of things that might be considered water structures, but what's important is that the language in the development agreement does specifically identify some certain things that are water structures. And one of those is a deck. So we argue that the settlement agreement is clear on its face, that the 1981 code should be applied throughout. If it were intended that the 1981 code only applies to the building envelope, the settlement agreement could have said that. I think that would have been fairly easy to put into language that would have been adopted by the parties, but it doesn't say that. And so we believe that the 1981 code should apply to the building of the promenade that we're constructing. Call it a deck, you can call it a promenade. What you can't call it, though, is a dock, and we'll get into that in a second. So that leads me into my second argument. And for my second argument, I'd like to call as my first witness the author of a letter dated May 3rd, Gregory Dunham.
Can I just stop you there, Mr.
Sure.
Weir? I jotted some notes down, I want to make sure that I did
Yes.
this correctly. And I wrote down that you had said the 2013 settlement agreement does not apply to structures in the water. Is that accurate?
That the 2013 settlement agreement,
2013 settlement agreement does not apply to structures in the water.
I did not say that.
You did not.
No. I said that the 2013 settlement agreement includes language that there will be a survey that will include a building envelope. That survey is the Exhibit C that was before the panel in one of the prior slides, and we can pull it back up if, do you need to look at it again?
No.
Okay.
It may have been in
Okay.
relation to setting forth the arguments by both sides.
I think that's it.
That's why I wanted to make sure I clarified what you had said.
Yeah, and so our position is that that Exhibit C clearly contemplates that you can build in the water. Again, it's just very limited. It seems like it's just these water structures. I don't know, maybe that's a slide of some sort, in addition to pilings, decks, docks, and other structures is what it says. But importantly, it does include the term deck, and you're going to see how we're going to analogize what we're building to a deck, frankly, because that's what it looks like. And it's just one of the specifically allowed water structures that can be built in the water area.
Okay, yes.
Okay.
Got it.
So, Mr. Dunham,
Let's swear the witnesses, please.
Ms. Taylor?
Swear to tell the truth, whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I did.
sir, as I understand it, this application came to you, correct?
Yes, it came to the town.
And you didn't approve the application, is that right?
I believe that was Ms. Tabor that did not approve it.
Do you know why the application was not approved?
I summarized that in the letter that you referred to.
Okay. Wait a second.
Next slide. I have a break.
So this here is a letter that we received from you. This is dated May 3rd, 2019. And in this letter, you include the definition of a dock. Do you recall doing that?
Yes.
Okay. Well, I apologize that these are being cut off at the top. Maybe there's an aspect ratio. So what the letter says at the top of the second page is that the town has regulated docks, in its code of ordinances since at least 1991. The town code defines a dock in section 66.1 definitions as follows. And it says, dock shall mean an accessory structure built on pilings over water, no part of which floats on water, and which is designed or used primarily to provide dockage for and access to one or more boats or water vessels for private use. And then it says that the proposed structure, both the promenade section and the boat dock section, are defined by the town code as a dock. And the question is, after now having read that, why is it that you believe the promenade section to be a dock?
Because the description of the promenade is basically a description of a dock.
Okay, the description of a dock, the operative language is designed or used primarily to provide dockage for and access to one or more boats. Do you agree that that's the language in the code?
I do.
Okay. And what is it about the promenade that you believe is designed or used primarily to provide dockage for boats?
Because the design is similar to a design for a dock. And I think this application there have been two applications before this in which it was designated as a dock.
Okay, but with the current application, it designates a promenade
Correct.
and a dock. And so the dock portion is limited to 5 foot in width. You understood that from the
No, I
application?
understand that,
Okay.
correct.
And so that portion is within the regulations of the code, correct?
It is, with the exception of the setbacks.
Okay. But other than that, that dock would be allowed, right?
It would not because it doesn't meet the setbacks.
Okay.
But in
Other
terms
than
of
the
the,
setback,
in
yeah.
terms of the width, yes.
Okay, and then the other portion, that being the promenade, you believe that that is still similar to a dock for some reason. You're indicating that it looks like a dock, and that's why you believe the promenade section should also be defined as a dock?
That's correct. I mean, it is possible that a boat could dock there.
Okay, so it's possible that a boat could dock there. How did you come to the conclusion that, we saw on a prior slide that there is a dock that's specifically allowed to be built, but that there's also decks that are allowed to be built? So it says clearly that a deck may be built as a water structure. Recall that slide?
No, I mean, can you go back to
Sure,
it?
we can go back to it. So this is the language here, and luckily the portion that's relevant is on the screen. It says pertinent structures such as decks, pilings, docks, and other structures, water structures, may be constructed and or installed in the area designated hereon as water. So you see that language that says that a deck may be constructed in the area that's designated as water, right?
Correct.
All right, so how do you differentiate between a deck and a dock?
Are you describing this promenade as a deck?
Well, I'm just asking you that question, being that it appears that these are two separate things in the view of the town.
Yeah, I'm gonna limit the testimony on this, because it seems to me that you're going well beyond what representation is made by Mr. Dunham and his responsibility as the town manager. And having not set any sort of predicate on what a promenade is relative to the 81 code or the 90s code, as it relates to a deck, pilings, or docks. So I don't believe you should go into that with this witness.
Okay, would it prefer, it would,
And the reason is, I'm allowing you leeway because typically we don't have witness testimony. These are not that type of hearing. But I was allowing you some leeway, and it seems to me that you're getting into areas which you have not even laid the predicate, and so therefore I think it's beyond the leeway you should be granted. I think you really should stick to the arguments you were making, asserting what the code was in '81, that it applies to this settlement agreement, how that code applies to a promenade and/or deck and/or dock.
sure.
And I don't think that testimony through this witness is an appropriate way of doing it.
Okay, just for the record, may I proffer the questions and then the board can instruct that he need not answer or that the testimony is limited?
No, I don't believe you can ask that question, so I think you should move on.
Okay. If the promenade is considered as a deck, can I ask those questions? If he considers the promenade section as a deck,
Well, but you haven't laid a predicate for what a promenade is.
okay?
So that's totally an inappropriate question for
Okay.
this witness in this type of hearing.
Okay,
Nowhere in any code have you indicated there's a promenade,
okay.
nor have you defined it.
I can put on, one of my later witnesses can talk about the promenade being a deck.
I think you
Is
should,
that proper?
you
Would
should
you rather have
bring
that
that
first?
witness forward to lay the
Okay.
basis for your argument.
No, it's okay. Okay, so why don't I go ahead and do that then first? I'll lay that predicate with another witness,
Okay.
and we can talk about that.
And again, as a cautionary, this is not gonna be like a trial at Court of Common Pleas.
Fair enough.
We're giving you some leeway here, keep it simple, keep it basic,
Sure.
and tie it into your arguments.
Okay, thank you. All right, so we call as the witness, Mr. Martin O'Boyle.
Let me just, well, I just have a little bit of cross-examination here related to the testimony that was allowed.
I'm not done with the witness though.
Oh, okay.
Yes,
Yeah.
he has the right to call the witness back.
Yeah, so what I'll
Okay.
do is I'll lay the predicate, I'll call the witness back.
All right.
And then Mr. Randolph, you'll have an opportunity to.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Do we have another microphone that you can be at, or? I guess we'll be up here together.
Yeah, he should stand with you,
Okay.
and Ms. Taylor, if you would swear in Mr. O'Boyle.
Raise your right hand. Swear to tell the truth, whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
I'm sorry, I affirm to tell the truth.
Sir, can you state your name?
Martin O'Boyle.
Are you the owner of the property that's the subject of the current proceeding?
I am.
All right, are you the application for the application at subject in the proceeding?
I am.
Okay. Is your property depicted on this plat that's shown on the slide?
It is.
Is your property line depicted on this map?
It is.
Okay, and are you familiar with the current code definition for a dock?
Generally stated, yes.
Okay. Do you see the language, next slide. Do you see the language that a dock is designed or used primarily for docking boats?
I do.
And what is your understanding of that definition?
That a dock is used primarily to provide dockage for boats.
Okay, are you requesting to build a dock on your property?
A portion of what I'm requesting is for a dock, yes.
Okay, what are you requesting to build?
We're calling it a promenade, you may want to call it a boardwalk, you may want to call it a deck. It's just a label, but it's not a dock.
Okay, is it designed primarily to dock boats?
No, I don't think you could even dock a boat there.
And why is that?
The elevation of the promenade, let me start this way. The typical seawall in my area is 4 foot. The docks in my area are either built at the same height of the seawall or they rest on top of it. So the docks are 4 foot to say 4'4", 4'6" high, and most of them have ladders to get into the boat. Ours is going to be in excess of 7 feet high. So it would be virtually impossible to have a boat.
We have a series of slides that show neighboring properties, and in the interest of time, I'd ask the board if it prefers that Mr. O'Boyle testify by summary as opposed to me just asking him questions on every slide.
That's fine.
Thank you.
Of course.
All right, if you want to explain to us what's shown in this slide here.
It might be better, I can speak loudly if you want me to.
Okay, sure, yeah.
This is the basin of Hidden Harbor. There are 4 lots on each side. This is my home here, and this is former Commissioner Wheeler's home here. And then there are 3 others beyond. This above, which you can't see, is the former Spence estate, which has been divided, developed by a fellow named Tom Ladani. And there, they have a dock here, which, according to Ms. Taylor, would not comply with the code. There is a boat lift here, which sticks out about 14 feet into the water. And when I say a boat lift, if you looked at it, you'd never know it was a boat lift. It's the best I've ever seen. It's just a cantilevered platform, essentially. And then here is another conventional boat lift. This represents the old dock that I had here, and that would be to accommodate a 40-foot boat. Mr. Wheeler, on the other hand, he has a dock which would be essentially the mirror of what I have. According to Ms. Taylor, a dock has to be no more than 5 foot from the seawall. This, Mr. former Commissioner Wheeler, he is 7 foot from the seawall. Mr. Ladani, who of course we all know back here that we just saw on the previous slide, his is 5 foot out from the sea cap, which I understand the same with Ms. Horstein's dock, which was recently constructed. So I'm not sure what the proper definition of the dock is, but what we have is Commissioner Wheeler, Commissioner Werthwein, Ms. Taylor, Mr. Ladani, they're all different. So I'm not quite sure what the definition is.
For the record, I'd like to object to the relevance of this testimony as it relates to this application here today. I don't think it's relevant as to what other people may have done. We don't know anything about their application. We're here really on the application of Mr. O'Boyle for a dock, and I think that the testimony should be confined to the ordinances as they relate to the dock.
I agree, there's no foundation or evidence to support the statements given, and they're being somewhat distracting from the issue at hand. I think, Mr. O'Boyle, you should focus on the dock/promenade issue before us on your property.
Well, it's not there.
But you have plans for it.
Yes, the plan's already been seen, yes, that's right. But I guess what I'm trying to point out is, if,
I understand, but there's been an objection, it's sustained.
right, but I just want to point this out, which is not, I don't think, Mr. Randolph's objection, it is, he's welcome to object again. And that is, what Mr. Former Commissioner Wheeler did here is, if I constructed what I wish, and we looked at it from the air, it would be virtually identical.
Well, that's the same,
Pardon?
that's the same point you made before. So
What we're just arguing is,
we understand, and you
Equal protection.
you don't unring a bell, Mr. Weir, so we've heard what it said. I think the objection is valid, and I would ask that, given your limited time period for presentation, that you focus the case on Mr. O'Boyle.
all right, Mr. O'Boyle, what was your understanding of the development agreement, that Exhibit C that indicated that water structures may be built in the water? It indicates decks, it says docks. Do you believe that your promenade fits into one of those categories?
Oh, the answer is yes. It's clearly a structure over the water, and a promenade is merely a label. We could have called it a boardwalk, we could have called it a deck. I would call it a promenade.
Okay. But your understanding is that the features between the deck and the promenade are similar to you?
Yes, it's a label.
Okay. And they're dissimilar to the features of a dock?
Yes, they're not consistent at all.
Okay. All right, that's all I have for...
I just have a question, Mr. O'Boyle. your promenade be supported by pilings on the water, similar to the photograph that you pointed out?
Can we go back to the prior photograph? The answer is, that would be my intention, however, I can do this just as well, where it would not be supported by piling. If the town would prefer I do that, I'm willing.
Well, what's the application that you submitted?
For piling, yes.
Piling.
But we could always amend it if that would be the town's preference.
And if I understand your testimony, that promenade extends 12 feet from the seawall and rises 7 feet, I believe you said?
Yeah, about that, and bear in mind.
7 feet from what?
Above Milo's, my understanding of the dock is it can be no higher than 5.5 feet. For obvious reasons, it wouldn't be a dock.
From the mean water.
That's right, it wouldn't be a dock. So I'm 7 foot, yes, that's right.
Thank you.
So we would call back Mr. Dunham. I believe that the foundation's been laid, that the term promenade is synonymous, at least in the intent of the applicant, with the term deck. Deck is specifically allowed by the city, and so we'd like to know, in the letter that refers to dock, why he chose dock as the definition for this structure and not deck, and could we build the deck as the city, as the town has indicated we can?
We can get to that, but I guess the question jumps out at me. Why didn't you apply for a deck? Why do you call it a promenade?
Well, my understanding is that the town code does not distinguish either of the two. In other words, that there's not much for a definition of a deck. There's no definition for what a deck is. There's no definition for what a promenade is. So we could have called it a red carpet walkway, a boardwalk. It could be lots of things. None of these are defined.
But you're setting forth a definition of dock. That's the point of your testimony, of the testimony from Mr. Dunn.
We're saying that,
But you're not setting forth a definition of deck.
well, we're wondering why the city has pigeonholed this structure as a dock, as opposed to what we believe it is. It is synonymous with promenade, it is a deck, but the reality is that we all know what it is. This is not something to tie up boats, it's not at a level that you could tie up boats. This is something that the gentleman wants to go out and sit down and have a glass of wine with his wife or enjoy a meal next to the water. You're gonna put, so it's a deck.
Proceed with just a couple questions with Mr. Dunn and then
Okay, sure.
wrap that up.
Mr. Dunham, the point that we're trying to get to here is that, the city, the town seems to have pigeonholed this structure as a dock, and it's saying that we can't build it because it's a dock, but we've already seen that the town has allowed us to build a deck over the water and in the water area. So we're just trying to do that, and we're trying to figure out how we can do that. Why is what we've proposed not considered a deck? Why is it only considered a dock?
As you mentioned before, these are labels, and there's not a definition of a deck in the code. I'm not familiar with any of these other ones at all. I mean, those were all approved before I was here. And in my experience, a deck is typically a structure that's built around a pool. This is my understanding of the deck, whether it's got a definition in the code or not. But in my experience, over the years, a deck is typically built around a pool and it's on land. And then what's built over the water is a dock. That's my experience.
Okay.
And we do have a definition of a dock in the code book, as you know.
Correct, and the dock is for the docking of boats primarily. But
Correct.
there's no definition for, and I'll ask you, do you know if there is in the current code a definition for a deck?
I don't believe there is.
Do you know if in the 1981 code there is a definition for a deck?
I don't know.
If you tell the applicant that he can build a deck, but you have no definition for what a deck is, what can he build if he wants to build a deck?
Well, he just gave his explanation of what he thought the deck would be,
Just the area around the pool?
and based on his experience, I take it as a town manager receiving applications for decks and docks.
Okay. Do you know if your 1981 code includes includes a definition for a dock.
No, I can't say specifically.
Okay. If a court determines that the 1981 code applies and the applicant can build anywhere on his property pursuant to that code, will you issue the permit?
That's a hypothetical question, it's not appropriate for this witness. I think that should conclude your questions of this witness.
Okay.
How much time do we have left, Ms. Taylor, do we know?
I think it's a few minutes.
Have
I can do my last witness in 4 minutes.
That's fine, you can do that. And if you would, focus on the 1981 code. That's where I haven't seen that fully developed with you.
Sure. And in fact, what we can do is we'll incorporate into our exhibits, our package, we'll
Okay.
include the 81 code.
Great.
Can I ask you a couple questions of Mr. Dunham?
Oh, yes, I'm
Mr.
sorry.
Cross?
Yes.
Mr. Dunham, I heard you say that there were previous applications filed by Mr. O'Boyle where this similar structure was termed a dock. Am I correct in that?
Yes.
And so, the only difference between what had been submitted previously, which was defined as a dock, was the applicant changing the name from a dock to a promenade or a deck and a dock.
Yes.
And there, to your knowledge, there's no provision in the code which allows for the building of decks or promenades over water. Even though this Exhibit C talks about decks and promenades, it states as permitted by the town, doesn't it? Is that correct?
Object to the question, I think it's tremendously leading of your own witness, but that's just for the record.
We've been giving plenty of leeway in how this hearing is being handled. You can proceed.
So what I understand, that this is the same, this structure is the same as a previous application which described the same structure as a dock, they simply changed the terminology.
Same objection, seems like counsel is testifying into the record.
I was already asked.
Good to know.
Yes.
Okay. And there's no definition in the code for decks or promenades, but there is a definition for a dock which talks about a structure built over the water on pilings.
Correct.
And
Object,
do you have,
characterization.
in order to do not classify it as a dock simply because boats won't dock there, you'd have to have the police enforce whether or not boats are going to dock there from time to time.
Same objection, testifying for the witness.
No,
Yeah,
that-
objections are noted.
That would be correct.
All right, thank you.
The last witness would be Mr. Robert Curry. Does he need to be sworn in?
Yes, he does. Ms. Taylor?
You swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
I do.
Sir, can you approach the podium here and stand next to one another? Please state your name for the record.
Robert Curry.
Are you an architect?
I am.
How long have you been an architect?
50 years.
Okay. I have your CV that I was going to hold up, but we'll include it in our exhibit package. Have you designed homes with docks?
I have.
Have you designed homes with decks?
I have.
Have you designed homes with decks over water?
I have.
From an architectural standpoint, are there design considerations that are different for decks versus docks?
Yeah, because one anticipates that a boat is being brought in. It has water and power and is a certain height. By definition of your code, it says it can only be 5 feet wide and it can't be higher than 5.5 feet high. And that's important because it relates to the size of the boat. And the boats that you get into Hidden Harbor can't really be bigger than that. There's no space in this particular case that can be more than about 40 feet. So those boats are relatively small, so you've got to have a dock that's low enough for them to get off the boat easily. The deck, I'll anticipate you, the deck, as I see it, it's a very tight site because of the configuration of this circular harbor. There's not much of a backyard as you're city manager said, there's a pool up there, and this is really an extension to the pool. It's a deck extension of the pool. We've dropped it about 4 inches from the hard surface, just to make sure you don't trip and fall. You understand there's a difference. But it's an expansion of the deck, and that's what we're doing.
Does it step up from the seawall?
It steps down 4 inches from the, no, it
So
steps
how
down.
does it rise 7 feet above the mean sea?
Yeah.
It's way above the seawall.
Yes, exactly.
Yes, exactly.
In fact, it's 2.5 to 3 feet above the seawall, isn't it?
Exactly, yeah, yeah. The pool deck is about 7 feet and a little more, because it slopes. And then we step down 4 inches, so it's about, well, actually, the pool deck's about 7'4". So we step down 7 feet for the dock, for the deck.
What did you design here for the applicant as relating to the promenade or deck and the dock? What is it that you've tried to design?
Well, we really wanted to expand the backyard, so to speak. That's really what we're after, to provide some space around the pool and particularly in the knuckle there, where we pop out a little bit, because it's so narrow there. So it's really a place to expand your, as I said, a place to sit outside and have a backyard.
Did you design a deck or a dock?
Oh, it's a deck.
Do you see the portion on the right-hand side? Is that also a deck or is that a dock?
That's a dock.
Okay.
That's a dock. That's down at 5 feet, 5 foot width and about 4'6".
Okay, so is it your testimony that you designed both the deck and the dock?
Correct.
Okay. And are you familiar with the current code limitations for a dock?
Yes.
And what are those?
Well, that it can't be higher than 5.5 feet high, it's gotta be 5 feet wide. It does have to be 15-foot setback from the side property line, that's true.
Does the dock portion of the proposed structure comply with that code?
It does, except for the setback.
Are you familiar with the current code limitations for a deck over the water?
No.
Did you see any code?
Well, yes, I do,
limitations?
actually on the side setback, if it's less than 8 inches higher than grade, you have to set back 3 feet from the property line, which we've done.
Okay.
That's
Other than setback limitations, did you see any other restrictions for the construction of a deck?
No,
Okay. Do you believe that the design structure, the deck, or the promenade to be compliant with current code?
I think so, yes.
Okay. And do you know what the setback is for the construction of this deck?
Setback from the property line?
Yeah, do you know if it's 3 foot or?
I don't know that.
Okay. All right, and so that would conclude the testimony from Mr. Curry. He talked about the 81 code and, well, talked about current code and there not being anything in there about the deck.
Mr. Curry,
Mr. Randolph?
did you find a definition for deck in the town code?
I did not.
Did you find a definition for promenade?
No.
Are you aware of anything in the code which states that a deck or a promenade can be built on pilings over water?
I didn't say it said it couldn't, if I
Well,
argumentative. I didn't
codes-
see either way, no. It says
Okay.
that you're allowed to build,
codes are written as permissive as to what can be allowed.
it says you
And
can
what is
build.
not allowed, what is not
It says
permitted
you-
is not allowed.
I know we have to speak one at a time because Cora's trying to get everything. If the witness could finish his response, would be appreciated.
Go ahead, Mr. Curry.
It's-
Complete your response.
It says that you can build a deck over the water, and that's what I think we do.
What says, where does it say that?
It says in the 81 code or whatever.
Exhibit
No, it's
C.
Exhibit C
Yeah.
talks about the ability to build docks or decks over the water, subject to approval of the town, which would mean that the town, in approving it, would use their code to determine whether or not it can be approved. So it allows docks, decks, or whatever else is in the Exhibit C, decks, pilings, docks, or other structures as approved, provided that such water structures are approved by the town of Gulfstream.
So what's your question, sir?
Well, you indicated that that exhibit allowed for those things to be built over the water. I'm suggesting to you that it doesn't it say that they can be allowed over the water subject to approval of the town?
Yes.
Okay. And the difference between the dock that's on the right in the other photo and the deck or the promenade on the left is simply the width.
And height.
Okay. So is there anything, so there's nothing to preclude the, what you call a deck or a promenade to be used for the docking of boats?
It's not feasible for a small boat to have a structure that they have to climb up to.
What about a large boat?
Well, but you can't get a large boat and dock it according to your rules. You've got to have a parallel space that's, for a dock, which is, in our case, about 40 feet is all you can get. Plus, it's kind of a narrow mouth that comes in. You've got 20 feet to get in from the intercoastal. We don't have water, we don't have electric there, we don't have davits, we don't have any indication for tying up a boat or getting off of it.
Okay.
Quick redirect.
Yes, sir.
Sir, did you design the deck portion, the promenade portion of the structure primarily for docking of boats?
No.
And sir, were you involved in the previous applications that came before the town where the deck or the promenade was termed a dock?
I'm a little vague on that. I know we talked to, I think the client had different concepts that we talked about, yeah. But I think initially, we always talked about a structure that was down at water level, you know, the 5-foot level, 4.5-foot level. Never one that was anticipated to be this high off of the existing grade. But
Isn't it true that the application that was termed a dock previously was essentially the same as the subsequent application, but only the name changed?
I don't recall that we provided anything of that nature.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Curry.
And so I'm done with my presentation. I think there's just a one-moment closing by my colleague who is co-counsel, Ms. Ellie Zacharias.
Okay.
Thank you for your time, and I'll move my package of exhibits into evidence. We'll just hand them to the clerk.
We'll accept them.
Thank you.
I didn't do it this way. Sorry, technical difficulty. I just need to be there. You just need to be there. Good morning, it's still morning. Ellie Zacharias, the name is Backman, 14 Southeast 4th Street. You heard a lot of testimony today, probably like here than you wanted to hear, about how the 1981 code applies. We believe that, we will continue to believe that, but I'm here before you to tell you that whether the 1981 code applies or the current code applies, the reality of the situation is a deck is permitted. There are no restrictions as to whether it's over water or not. Your code does not clarify or limit a deck to only on land and not over water. This property is actually located in the north-south district, I believe it's called. I apologize if I'm wrong. But if you read the description of that zoning district, it specifically talks about pools and decks in the rear of the property. It later in your code talks about heights of decks. Not heights of decks. Yes, heights of decks. If it's over 8.5, you have to have a certain setback, side setback. If it's under 8.5, you have a 3-foot setback. That's the way it was designed. We provided the setback. It meets code. It cannot be a dock. A dock is defined to primarily dockage of boats. As you heard from testimony today, a boat would literally go under this deck. It is not designed. It cannot be used for the dockage of boats. And as such, it clearly cannot meet the definition of a dock in your code. Deck may not be defined, but a dock is. and this cannot, by definition, be a dock. Perhaps we mistakenly called it a promenade, and that may have been our fault. We should have just called it a deck. But they're interchangeable. If you look at the definition of a promenade, in Merriam-Webster's dictionary, it says a place for strolling. I hope we can all agree on at least that. A deck is just that, right? A place for strolling. It's synonymous with a promenade. This is a picture of a promenade. Also, if you look at this picture, you would think a boardwalk. You would think a deck. They're all synonymous with one another. With all of that, whether 1981 code applies, which is what we believe, whether today's code applies, which is what your town attorney believes, irrelevant, a deck is permitted by code. But nonetheless, what I submit to you today is work with us. We're here to work with you. We don't want to fight with you. We just want to finish the construction of the home. So we respectfully request that if we can have an open dialogue today, what is it about our design, about our deck, our proposed deck, and or proposed dock up to the right of the property? If there's something about that that we can revise, we're more than happy to listen to those requested modifications. Your commission sitting here today has the right to grant as it is, deny as it is, or approve with modifications. So if there's something upsetting you or concerning you about the proposed deck and or the proposed dock, let's talk about it. Let's have a resolution that we can all work with. The house is being built. It's a beautiful home. It's a home that everybody in the town will be proud of. We're certainly not doing anything to diminish our property values nor the property values of our neighbors. So with that, we respectfully request some open dialogue and perhaps some resolution today. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Randolph?
Yeah, well, I just want to state that this is not a hearing to have open dialogue in regard to mitigation. Depending upon your actions today, the dialogue would take place with staff in regard to what modifications, if any, would be made or what else might be done. So I respectfully suggest that this is not the time for you to have an open dialogue in regard to what else may be done on this property.
No, we agree.
I do have, I don't know if you want to take a 2 or 3 minute break, but I would like to submit the evidence, which includes the development agreement, the settlement agreement, and the codes, the applicable codes, and my letter to Bill Ring explaining the town's position in regard to this.
All right, I think at this point, Mr. Ware, if you would submit your documents, we'll
Sure, thank you.
accept them at this time.
I just handed them up, so they are, as town attorney had indicated, it's the development agreement, with the settlement agreement incorporated within it, the photographs that were viewed, the 1981 code, and the CV for Mr. Curry.
Okay, and then Mr. Randolph is providing his exhibits.
Yeah, and I have
Once
extra
they're-
copies
I'm
of
giving you
81
one.
if you want.
Oh, okay. And once we receive this, we're going to take a 5-minute break.
May I approach with
Yes,
anyone?
of course.
Mr. Mayor, if I may, as a point of correction, your code actually talks about in section 66-173, and I respectfully disagree with Mr. Rudolph. It says, for you, sitting here, fail to fully consider mitigating measures or revisions offered. I actually think that it is completely within your purview to discuss things that we can change and modify to our deck and or our
I
dock.
don't disagree with you, but I don't think this is the forum to do that.
These are the
This is a-
standards for you today in your code. And also, as a point of clarification, again, Mr. Rudolph incorrectly stated our previous submittals were, as Mr. Curry correctly noted, our previous submittals were for a complete dock at 4.5, 5 feet tall. That is not what's before you. So previously, we proposed a dock. That application is not before you, nor should we be penalized now that we've created a deck that cannot dock boats, was not designed to dock boats. We can't be penalized for a previous application that's not before you today.
Yeah, thank you. I believe he did testify to that.
Let me clarify, the criteria that she's talking about talks about failing to consider mitigating circumstances. So it refers to the staff failing to consider mitigating circumstances, which may have been presented, and I haven't. Everybody has their copy? Let's take a 5-minute recess.